So this is going to be a tale in two parts. So we're going to have this video and then we're going to do another video. But before we get to the reason why we're doing two videos, we've got to explain why we're doing two videos first. So what's happened? Well, out of nowhere on Monday morning, the Telegraph pretty much cleaned its front pages to have a massive mega poll, a poll of polls funded by, well, some interesting conservatives in the background. Of course, Lord Frost deciding to make an appearance out of seemingly nowhere, telling them this is the doom that the Tories face. And oh boy, does this poll predict a lot of doom and gloom for the Tories. And this is why we're going to do two videos, because first of all, we're going to look at an analysis that looks at this poll and then sort of realizes, hold on a second, this poll has not even for a second taken into account tactical voting. So while it is predicting this disaster for Tories, the reality that it is ignored of the tactical voting being very, very prevalent going into the next general election is going to be potentially even worse. So that's today's video. Tomorrow's video, we're going to cover what is essentially, according to Conservative Home, seems to be the potential beginnings of what might be a leadership poll, bringing even bigger portents of doom to come. But that's tomorrow's video. Today we're going to have a look at the analysis of this and have a look breaking down not only this mega poll of polls predicting disaster for the Tories, but then completely forgets about tactical voting and other things as well. So we're going to have a look at that first today, because it just underscores just how panicky the Tories are at the moment. And also not forgetting, this week we're going to be seeing a lot of action on the Rwanda front. Certainly today and in the coming sort of week. That is going to, and this poll, of course, is going to be underscoring a lot of disaster, a lot of the right-wing Tories, as we covered Danny Kruger last week, saying that, oh no, we need to have this hard right shift. Meanwhile, you've got this massive poll predicting disaster for you. All I can say is interesting things, potentially, shall we say, cooking at the moment. But we're going to have a look, as we said, at this analysis, because I find this very, very interesting. But before we do that, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, as always, there is the YouTube thank you button, and of course, the Pony Club as well down below. So let's go over to this on The Guardian with the title of Mega Poll Predicts Disaster for the Tories, but reality could be even worse. So, for Conservative MPs opening their Daily Telegraph on Monday morning, it was a distinctly gloomy start to the week. A mega poll suggesting that they are heading for a crushing general election defeat. And this was arguably an optimistic take. So bear in mind, there is already at this moment in time a Tory rebellion brewing. Like right now, there is a Tory rebellion brewing. And don't worry, I do want to cover it. But this, you have to understand just what is going on in the background that is going to be driving a lot of these Conservative MPs to now say, well, you know what? We didn't rebel last year because we had pinned all our hopes on, Rishi can sort it out and we'll give him a year. Now he has been unable to stop that. And it generally looks like a lot of Tories are now starting to go, why not rebel? what have we got to lose? If we are this behind in the polls, what have we got to lose? And Rishi Sunak was already a terrible leader. So all of a sudden, you've now got this, which is going to be driving even more Tory rebellions. So let's continue on this. So, for one thing, some pollsters believe that the YouGov conclusion of the 120-seat Labour majority could be an underestimate. An underestimate. A 120-seat Labour majority is just an underestimate of this. Additionally, the poll organisers seem intent on using findings to push the party further to the right on immigration, a move that will dismay many of the Tory centrists and seems unlikely to stop the rot. And this is it. This poll was funded by the Tory right with the distinct reasoning that if we can show that we are right, that if we go that doubling down, being ever more hard right on immigration is the correct path to go, because after all, the general public, want us to go in this direction. Again, not what you get when you get, polling, you go out and ask people. But this is, again, the civil war that is openly now going to happen in this week in particular over the Rwanda bill. And oh boy, depending what goes in this Rwanda bill, as we said before, it's going to be an absolute mess. Like that, the Rwanda bill is going to be an absolute mess. Whatever its final, pieces when it comes out of the committees after the debates this week. Oh boy, it's going to be an absolute mess. So, notably, of course, aspects of the poll come in two main parts. The first is its findings. That YouGov surveyed over 14,000 people and extrapolated the results to constituencies using a multi-level regression and post-stratisfaction model of MRP that has predicted that the Conservatives would retain only 169 seats. That's 196 fewer than their 2019 total, while Labour would take 385, the Liberal Democrats 48, and the SNP 25. So, okay, you've used, again, small sample sizes. Well, not a small sample size. 14,000 is exactly small. But that's their sort of reasoning. What would happen now if among this? But it's interesting because we're now going to see people predicted to lose their seats. So this would be a disaster for the Conservatives, resulting in over 11 current cabinet ministers losing their seats. Among them, Jeremy Hunt, Grant Shapps, Gillian Keegan, and it could and might be worse. Rob Ford, the professor of politics at Manchester University, noted that the YouGov modelling appeared to play down the effect of tactical voting in many seats where Conservative MPs were at risk of challenge, saying, "It doesn't seem very credible to me that a Tory Lib Dem marginal of 10% of people would still support Green. And why not care and would not care either way about the opportunity to get rid of a Conservative MP. It does suggest that things could be even worse for Conservatives," Ford said. So I agree with him. Why waste your vote this year or at the next general election voting third party when you could vote Lib Dem or Labour and you could boot out your Conservative MP and fundamentally damage the Conservative Party for a decade or more? Like this is what is coming up at the next general election. We could absolutely destroy the Conservative Party for the next decade or more potentially, and during that time, while they're in an absolute mess, we could get a lot, and I mean a lot, of progressive things done. So you've got to think, as I've said before, think about the future. And I agree. Why on earth would these 10% of people decide, oh, we'll vote Green Party? But why? Your chance there is to go, well, instead of voting Green, I'm going to vote Lib Dem because I really want to get rid of my Conservative MP. You know, that is going to be and should be the message sent to the next general election, that voting tactically, voting for either Labour or the Lib Dems, wherever you might be, is going to be the best option to get rid of your Conservative MP. And the more we get rid of them, the more that go, the worse it becomes, the bigger mess the party becomes, and is gotten rid of, pretty much becomes a mess for a decade, if not more. And during that time, there's a lot of stuff we can then get done. A lot of stuff. And that is the real true victory at the end of the next general election. The more Conservatives go, the more mess they become in, the bigger progressive victories we can have in the future, because they're not going to be around to try and mess things up or get in the way. There's not going to be enough of them to be able to mess with progressive policies or anything like that that we want to try and push and do in the future. So, another point of interest is the political backdrop to a large and very expensive polling operation. And this is where, in our next video, this is where it gets interesting, and what the Conservative viewpoint is going to be, that there are, shall we say, other things going on in the background. But like I say, that will be tomorrow's video. So, remember to subscribe for that if you haven't before. And of course, click on the bell. So, wait. So it was, the Telegraph have said, commissioned by the Conservative Britain Alliance, a previously unknown organisation described as a group of conservative donors. This is what tomorrow's video is going to be about from the Conservative video, because, oh boy, there is some stuff cooking. There is some serious stuff cooking in the Conservative Party. Hence why tomorrow we're going to cover the Conservative viewpoint of what this was, because, oh boy, fun. So, YouGov, the Telegraph added, worked with the Tory peer David Frost, who contributed an opinion piece arguing that the only way back from the brink was for the party to go much harder on immigration, seeking to even temper former Tory voters who were backing Nigel Farage's founded Reform UK, saying the big problem is immigration, illegal as well as legal. That's why this week's vote on Rwanda is so important, Frost writes. Here's the thing. The problem right now facing the UK, nothing to do with immigration. Absolutely nothing to do with immigration. We've discussed this so many times. If you listen to people's complaints on immigration, it's not immigration that is the problem. It has been 13 years of Tory rule, Tory austerity, and doubling down on right-wing ridiculous policies that has led the UK to where we are. And people are finally starting to catch on to this, that they are now trying to bring up the smokescreen of, oh, it's all immigration. Immigration's the problem. That's what it is. Remember, they can't blame the EU and Britain being in the EU anymore. Got to find a new scapegoat for all of Britain's problems. So it's now become immigration. So this is where, once again, it gets more interesting. The Telegraph runs its own analytics, arguing that reform votes would play part of the 96 losses for Conservatives, making the difference between a catastrophic loss and a hung parliament, meaning that a lot of this stuff that is being put out by this group of Conservative donors is an attempt to try and get Tory Telegraph readers not to vote reform. Because if you do, well, it's either going to be an absolute catastrophic loss, or we might end up in a hung parliament. This is what this is, and what a lot of people have said about this report, that it is entirely designed to try and get those Tories who might be flirting with the idea of going to reform to say, hold on, if you do that, it's going to be an absolute catastrophic loss, or it might end up in a hung parliament. And you don't want that, do you? And trust me, there is stuff, and when we get to the Conservative article next, the next video, oh boy, oh boy. Again, I'm teasing it so much, but yeah, this is why we have to go through those first, because we're going to be referencing a lot of this from what is said in that other article as well. So where are we? So the combined message is, of course, very clear. Copy reform, notably on the small boats and on immigration more generally. Others, however, disagree, saying that the Telegraph analytics works on the basis that all these seats would come back if every single reform vote went back to the Conservatives. And that's a mighty big if, Ford said. Even YouGov felt obligated to note in their in-house report on the polling to stress that the Telegraph analytics of reform vote was, quote, not a reliable way of measuring their impact. Ford added, while I do agree with David Frost, is that the government is in a lot of trouble, but it doesn't seem rational to me to endlessly focus on an issue where polling says voters don't trust you and you risk alienating the One Nation MPs. Tory MPs on the right think of the centrists a bit like Labour MPs think of the Lib Dems. They either pretend that they don't exist or that if they do, they won't do anything. And that's true if more are squeamish than the right of the party. But there are enough of them who are angry and who can only be pushed so far. And oh boy, this week, we're going to see how far they get pushed. Like, make no mistake, we're going to see how far they get pushed on this. Tim Bale, professor of the politics at University of Queen Mary University, London, said that while the YouGov polling appeared solid, the spin put on it by Frost and friends is something else altogether. Exhibit A would be their central claim that if reform went in the picture, the Tories could prevent Labour from winning an overall majority, a claim that depends entirely on the battery assumption that every single voter who else would otherwise vote reform would then vote Tory instead. Essentially, this is a laughably transparent scare attempt to Tory MPs into trying to allow their party on being equally on an equally batty basis about immigration and woke are more important to the voters than the economy and the NHS, and to be pushed even further to the right. And the tragedy is that this might just work. So there you've had that version. You've had the analysis of what we have, where you've had people look at it and go, there's something not right about this poll. Of course, as we said, doesn't take into account tactical voting. There's the big if that, oh, if reform weren't here, all those reform votes would magically go to the Conservatives. That's a big if, and a big if doing a lot of heavy lifting in that statement. A lot of heavy lifting. Because I'll tell you now, when you look at some of the poll numbers, particularly like last election, I don't think Green Party voters are going to necessarily go, I'm going to vote Green this time. I think a lot of them will go, you know what, I'd rather get rid of my Conservative MP and vote Labour or Lib Dem. That is what the message I've heard time and time again when I've been out there, when I've been talking to people. People want to get rid of their Conservative MPs, and the message of tactical voting is sinking more and more in than ever before. People have had enough of the Tories. They want rid of them. They want a change. So, but a big part of this, of course, was we want to push the centrists. We want to scare the centrists into backing us this week, which is what you are seeing at the moment in Parliament today, in the Commons, in the committee rooms, trying to get all these insane right-wing Tory ideas, which again we covered just very recently as well. But also, we've got that one nation Tory idea being put forward by Robert Buckland, but basically says, yeah, you can't ignore international law and you can't ignore the European Court of Human Rights, which, bear in mind, if that amendment ends up in the bill, then every single other amendment that the Tories, the Tory right wants to put in contradicts that amendment itself, which is why I said just a few videos ago, this is going to be an absolute mess of a video, of not a video, but a mess of a bill going through. But we're seeing that play out right now. But like I say, stay tuned, of course, for the next video, because now we're going to go into some conservative deep diving. And oh boy, it looks like there are some serious maneuvers going on behind the scenes in the Conservative Party that do not bode well for Rishi Sunak. Some of them aligning to the fact that there might be, depending on how this week goes, maybe there is a full-blown rebellion leading into, dare I say, letters to the 1922 committee. And of course, bye-bye Rishi Sunak, hello, probably Kimmy Badenoch at this point in time, if you look at the polls. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, stay tuned for that next wonderful, wonderful leap into the Conservative worldview of what they thought of that video. Of that, shall we say, that Telegraph polling, the polling of doom, shall we say. So, as always, we'll see you all next time.